this week's episode of the Ripple Effect Podcast. We are so glad that you're with us, whether you're watching this online or you're listening to this on the go. I'm in the studio, and to my right is Mr. Ed Lewis joining us today. He's going to be our spotlight for the day. We're glad you're here. And to his right is Mr. Brian Sevitz. It's a boys podcast, just the boys. So as usual, we'll do a review of Sunday. We will do our top three and then our spotlight. But before we get to any of that, we have to give you the sponsor of the week. And the sponsor of the week, I have selected a Coleman Pack Your Lunch cooler, because we'll talk about in a little bit, but we're going to do a picnic on Sunday. And so you got to make sure you bring your cooler. Mary gave me some chips, so I don't know if you want them later. But
I think so.
So Coleman, if you want to send us some money, that'd be great. Okay. Let's get to the review of Sunday. This past week, we had church. And we were talking and continuing our series in creation. You had a great band. You had a pretty cute bass player up there with you this week. It was my wife. Yeah, it was my wife. It was the bass player. Did anything unique happen Sunday? Have any good conversations? Any terrible things?
We started our growth group, so Sunday morning was great. I love the team.
Give us a highlight of Sunday,
my highlights from last week were like starting our growth group, and it's people who don't all know each other, so that's kind of what they're for. Get to know some new people, and a couple of them just newer to the church.
That's great.
But also, last week we had Wednesday night start, and like that was a big highlight. This building was full of people.
It was full.
Every room almost was bursting with people, and more than I've ever seen. We have always had a lot of people that come Wednesday, but that was pretty crazy.
Yeah, there was a lot of people here on Wednesday night. It was great. Well, that's awesome. Ed, do you have a highlight from Sunday? How was your Sunday?
Well, I really enjoyed the church service. I thought your sermon was right on spot.
Thank you.
Thought you did a great job with that. We had a great Sunday school class because
Did you teach?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a good Sunday school class. We're in John, and of course he starts off in the beginning was the word.
He does.
The word. So it was a little bit related, but we enjoyed that, and we finished John 1 in Sunday school class. We had 40-some members there, so
that's awesome.
Pretty good class.
That's a great turnout. Well, if you missed any of the stuff that happened on Sunday, you can go to tlcc.church and catch up there. This is also posted on the Facebook and YouTube as well. Brian, give us a TLCC top three things they need to know going into this week.
All right. Well, I just picked these myself because we didn't have time to confer, but I put number one is Tuesday night softball.
Oh,
so
all right.
Just
giving
because
giving the softball team a shout out.
You've given them a shout out on Facebook,
That's
but
true.
people are always like, "I want to come watch that," and they don't see the post or whatever.
That's true.
So I was out there last week. I don't play. My wife plays, and I spectate.
She's our second base extraordinaire on there.
So they should be watching this Tuesday. If you're watching it Tuesday, it's going to be Tuesday night, 6 p.m. on Field 3, 7 p.m. Field 5.
Yeah.
So you can come watch the team.
Doubleheader?
Always a doubleheader. Well, they're not always back-to-back, but you usually play two games.
Yeah.
6 and 7.
Yep.
Yeah, I did post the schedule on Facebook, but I haven't really said much because we've lost a lot this year. And so you don't. We love the support, so come on out and support.
But people love, like, I was sitting there just chatting with people most of the night last week, and that's fun. Like, you're it's not like you're at church and you only have 3 minutes here and there. You can sit there and have a conversation, so that's good. And second one is this coming Sunday, outdoor church at the Fennel. So we're going to say that as many ways as we can.
Pray for good weather.
So that you all don't show up at the door.
It looks like it'll be dry.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah,
that's what Brian was saying. He's like, it's going to be dry.
Well, there's differing opinions between like weather.com, AccuWeather, and NOAA. They're all different.
We're just praying for dryness. Just let it be dry in the morning. And then
we need the rain.
We do need the rain. But then it can rain later in the day.
Well, it looks like sometime this weekend we should get rain.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's good.
So 10:45, only one service Sunday. Pack a picnic. Bring your lawn chair if you can. If you're able to walk, don't park right by the gate. Try to, park further away and leave those spots for people who need it. Somebody asked me, yes, the bathrooms will be open at the Fennel, and it's pretty like ADA accessible. It's all one level, so I don't think you'll have any problem getting in there. It looks like it's going to be nice weather on 2 of the sites, so we're going to hope we go with that. Our rain plan is we would just come back here, right? So we probably would make the call like Saturday at least and put it out there because we're not going to wait till that morning. I don't think so. We're going to hope it all happens, but if we don't have the service at the Fennel, we decided we probably wouldn't try to all pack in here during one service. We'd go ahead and have 2 services. But your kids would probably have to be with you because we haven't recruited any teachers.
We've told all the teachers that they get that Sunday off and all the workers. So at this point, we're all just going to be together and have a good old service. Third
one, I put this on here, and you talked about it Sunday. Alan and Marilyn are going to be here in a couple weeks. We're looking forward to that. I just thought we should say that on here in case you missed that. So we hope you'll show up and hear about what's going on with their ministry and their move and all that stuff. So those are our top 3.
All right, there you go. Tuesday night softball, if you want to come out and support the team, 6 and 7 out at Howard Hills Athletic Complex out there on 24. We've got a church at the Fennel, which is happening next week. 1 service, 10:45, and then in a few weeks we've got Alan and Marilyn coming here.
Yeah, well, and I am assuming a lot by just saying Alan and Marilyn. They used to be here. They were here for 20 plus years as youth minister. I mean, a lot of these people are newer. They don't even know who we're talking about.
That's true.
They are now missionaries, and we support them monthly. And I don't want to say too much about they're shifting their focus of their ministry, and they're going to tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's going to be great. All right, as the spotlight of the week, we have Mr. Ed Lewis. Ed has been here and around Timberlake Christian Church for
20 years.
20 years.
It was before it was Timberlake. It was
still Union Avenue. And he is an elder here. He teaches one of the classes and has been involved in pretty much every area of ministry. Mostly at this church.
A lot of teaching.
Yeah, a lot of teaching. So what I like to do is I'll give you 60 seconds and imagine this person has never met you. Who is Ed Lewis and what do you need to tell them? Okay, you get 60 seconds on your mark, set, go.
I am a father of 6, obviously married to my wife Sarah, and I'm a father of 4 children and 8 now, grandchildren. And I've taught for years and years, both here at the high school across the street, over at the college for 30 years. And when I stopped teaching at the public high school, I became the state representative for Randolph and Macon County. And I do a lot of teaching. That's kind of, my strength.
Yeah.
So that's me.
20 seconds. You good?
I'm good.
That's great. Some people, Salonik took 4 seconds, I think he did.
Is that right? 4 seconds?
He said, I'm a child of God and a servant of the King, and then he was done.
That was it.
That was the only one. My dad took 900 seconds.
Well, just
the base. You get the snapshot. That's great. That's awesome. Well, I want to talk to you about your teaching. We've been talking about Genesis. I want to talk about creation. But before we get into that, I do want to talk about or ask you a question about coming up. You've been on the side of government now, where you're in down at Jeff City. You're at the Capitol. Maybe give a quick snapshot of just some things that you think are big things that we should be thinking about going into this voting season.
Well,
and that's a whole lot. I know that's a whole can of worms. But
I think people should vote for the policies that they want to see, regardless of personalities. That you should focus on policies and who is going to uphold the policies that you want. And, in this upcoming election, there's a whole bunch of amendments on the on the ballot that are going to, some of them are going to try to change the Constitution of Missouri. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a big fan of trying to change the Constitution, especially with a simple majority, which these would do. Mm-hmm. And so I would encourage people to, make sure that they read up on the amendments. Read carefully, and be careful to. I would just say vote no. If it's going to change the Constitution, just vote no.
Yeah, you talk to a lot of voters. You talk to a lot of people that agree with you. Do you talk with a lot of people that disagree with you?
Sure.
And how do you, as a Christian, kind of balance that? We can agree to disagree. I have my beliefs, and how do you kind of navigate that? I know we're way off topic.
Well,
here,
on this subject, on the amendment, mm-hmm. changing the Constitution or whatever, to me, 50%, which is what it's set at on an initiative petition, is 50% plus one, is too low of a bar mm-hmm. to change the Constitution, because things that you put in the Constitution, once they're in there, are very, very difficult for us in the state legislature to do anything about, and, the perfect example is the marijuana amendment that went into the Constitution with, 50% of the voters that voted then, which was only 26% of the actual people that are registered to vote, changed the Constitution of Missouri, enshrined in the Constitution this issue that marijuana can be, sold, freely in the United States, even though it's against the law, against federal law. And, it's a real problem. And it ties the hands of the legislature to be able to do anything about it. They purposely tied the hands of the legislature with that amendment. And it's made it very difficult to when people say, hey, this is a problem with this. We understand it's a problem. And
what can I do about it right
now? We
can't
do anything about it because it's constitutional. Mm-hmm. So that's a real problem, and that's what we don't want to happen with some of these other amendments that are coming up on the ballot in November. So people need to read and pay attention.
Yeah, that's good. Well, you have to talk politics all the time, so let's get to a subject that's a little bit more fun.
Yeah.
Politics can be fun as well.
More and controversial, but this topic can be controversial.
Absolutely, right. Absolutely. So let's get into it. All right, what made you decide to be a science teacher? Because you were a science teacher for a long time. Was there just like, hey, this is a need and I'm going to meet it, or I really am interested in this? What made you decide?
No, it was, I liked science. Specifically, I liked chemistry. Mm-hmm. When I was in high school, it was the first class that I'd come across that I thought was kind of challenging, that, that it was interesting, but yet challenging. Everything else, but sometimes was maybe, for me, it was the first really challenging course I had, and there was so much more to know. And I just found it interesting. Down the hall, the biology class wasn't my favorite. Went to the chemistry class, that was my favorite. And so that was, and my teacher, my chemistry teacher, who eventually became a full-fledged doctor in chemistry, he was inspiring, and that's really where I decided I wanted to be a teacher, and specifically a chemistry teacher.
Oh, that's great. Some people say that science and the study of the universe and a belief in God can be counter one another. As a follower of Jesus, have you found that the study of the sciences has deepened your faith? How and why?
Well, I think so. I think that really, Romans 1, I think 20-22, where Paul there is writing to his letter to the Romans, and he says, the evidence for God is all around you. Mm-hmm. Everywhere you look, it should be evident to everyone that there is a creator. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what it says right there in Romans 1, mm-hmm. 20-23. And I think that's true. It says, he finishes up that says, but people, that don't accept, they consciously forget. They deliberately forget this, and they look and they put in place for a god instead of God. In place of the creator, they start worshiping the created and animals and birds and so on and reptiles, it says. And I think that's exactly speaking to what people who don't accept that there is a creator God, they have to have something in its place, and usually that's something created.
Did you, when you were teaching, did you run into evolutionary theories or evolution in itself where you either had to teach it or you had to talk about it? And how did you navigate that as a Christian who says, I don't necessarily believe these principles?
Absolutely. Yeah, all the time. I mean, literally, if not every day, I mean, at least every week or every month, there is always a contention between a belief in God the Creator and an idea that everything came about by random chance, and those two are counter to each other. They are absolutely opposites. Either there is a God who created, or we came about by random chance. Those don't really fit very well. So there's always that conflict.
And I was listening to one comedian who was talking about how we came out of nothing. The nothing people are the funniest of all. Like when you look and see nothing, really?
Yeah, no. It's difficult. That's one of the things people say. How can you possibly believe that there was a God that created everything? Isn't that really just too difficult, too hard to accept? That's just too far fetched. And then you say, well, the alternative to that is what? A big explosion.
For no reason.
Out of this explosion over long, long periods of time with no direction and by random chance, all the organization that we have in life and all the intricacies of life just happened to be.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't, that's not hard to accept.
Yeah.
But the other is, and since you can't find the origin of life on the earth, you can't trace that.
We got to go somewhere else.
It has to have been planted here 3.8 billion years ago by some alien life form. Yeah. Now that's difficult to accept, right? And that is the most modern concept, is that life was planted here 3.8 billion years ago. Hard to accept that that's somehow naturalistic, but God, the creator of all nature, is not naturalistic. He's supernatural, but space alien 3.8 billion years ago, that's acceptable.
That makes sense. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I struggle with that.
Oh, absolutely. Brian, what's your favorite dinosaur?
I don't even know.
Did you like dinosaurs?
I always liked drawing the Brontosaurus because I could actually do it.
Right.
But I have no reason.
It's a little simpler. Long neck, long tail.
Yeah.
But the Brontosaurus is kind of a misname. I guess it was named after someone else had already named it. And so
really?
I think it's technically an apatosaur.
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 In my boys' dinosaur book that we read all the time, it is named Apatosaurus.
Yeah, Apatosaurus. Yeah.
I asked that because talk to me about dinosaurs. So even within our Christian sphere here, there's differences of opinions about Adam and Eve walking with dinosaurs. Do you have a hot take on dinosaurs?
Well, that's not an easy question to answer in 30 seconds. But
but
I will.
But you can do it because you're amazing.
So we'll say if we accept the premise that dinosaurs or dinosaurian animals are reptilian, and all reptiles continue to grow as long as they live, which is true. They just get bigger and bigger. And if we know that pre-flood things lived for, people lived 10 times longer, right? So if reptiles lived 10 times longer, they would also be 10 times larger. And so there are still reptilian type animals and dinosaurian type animals that would, we would say, there would, I understand certain types of dinosaurian animals are extinct, but reptilian animals still exist. And they, even according to evolutionists, would have coexisted at the same time as those others, as the other dinosaur animals. So I think that's at least one possible explanation of why. I mean, there's other explanations. I mean, there's other animals, not just dinosaurs, that were extra large in Earth's past. We have bears that were large and sloths that were large and dragonflies that had wingspans of almost 2 feet. Yeah. So when you start talking about, things back in the ancient day, the pre-flood world, the antediluvian world, and the post-flood world, there obviously the world was different pre-flood, and there were people there, and there were dinosaurs there. They would have commingled.
I love
probably
it.
Not staying in the same location.
Probably
the people would have stayed away.
You got a Komodo dragon that's 10 feet long. You're probably not going to be near him too closely.
Yeah.
I alluded to that a little bit in one of the sermons about the pre-flood, at least the environment that was perfect for life for a period of time.
You said that very well, I thought.
And
it was utopia.
That's kind of what I think is one of my favorite examples is when you take the skull of a hippopotamus. Have you seen people do this? Where if you take a skull of a hippopotamus and you show it to someone who doesn't know what it is and say, what would this animal have looked like?
Right.
And you tell it it's a dinosaur, they come up with a red skin and a giant thing, and then you show it a picture of a hippopotamus with his curls, his ears.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times God gives us an imagination, which is great, but sometimes we put into it a little bit more. But just the scale, just because something's large and the scale of it's big, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the Jurassic World where one dinosaur is just constantly eating the bigger dinosaur.
And we know that in science's past, we have done exactly that with different finds. Piltdown man and Nebraska man, Hesperopithecus Harold Cookeye is the name of Nebraska man. It was used in the Scopes trial as evidence to bolster evolution.
Is this a gap individual? That's someone that's in the gap of evolution?
They were saying at the time that this organism was a human ancestor and that it was, and they drew up,
what it would have looked like.
They drew up, they came up with not a whole family, and they artist rendering. But then they found the rest of as they continued to dig, that was entered in a case of law in Tennessee, and yet when they found the rest of it, there was a pecarry, which is a type of pig. And so they found the rest of the organism, and so of course that's been discredited now. But it's after,
of course, it's already
right. It doesn't matter; it's already been used in a court of law to bolster the case for evolution. And the same thing with the Piltdown man. It was that one was in England, but they had done the same type of thing, and then found out, okay, this was this piece of jawbone had been filed on and then stained with potassium bichromate to make it look old,
and buried it was
right? That one was a purposeful thing.
Plant,
The other one was they just accepted it.
I never heard of the Nebraska man.
Yeah.
But they found it in
Pithecus Harold Cookeye. It was found by Harold Cook.
Okay.
So in the case with William Jennings Bryan and Clarence Darrow, that was a piece of evidence that was entered on the site of evolution.
And they found it in Tennessee.
It was found in Nebraska, which was William Jennings Bryan home state.
Okay.
And so they wanted to use that in your home state. Here's the evidence. And this is the evidence, and how can you dispute it?
Right.
Well, of course, the evidence they used should have been disputed because it was false.
Yeah, incomplete.
It was false.
Yeah.
I mean, it was not just incomplete, it was false.
Yeah.
And of course, if you have a small fragment and that's what, a lot of times with, fossil finds, if you have incomplete evidence, you can allow your imagination to make up the rest. And that's where a lot of the problems come in, is you want to rebuild something and make something out of it that isn't actually in a fact or an evidence, something that you can actually use. But creative license allows you to rebuild it the way you want to.
That's true. I'm going to pivot here and switch gears, because there's a lot that we can study and that we can know, and you have spent years studying and learning and gaining knowledge. But there's also so much about the universe that God still encourages us to have wonder and awe about. Give us something that you still wonder about, maybe about how the world works or questions that you still haven't quite answered. Give us something that you still wonder about the universe.
Well, there's a lot of things I could come up with. But one of the ones I think is really, we know that, I have made the conclusion for myself that God created the heavens and the earth the earth was formless and void. God's Spirit was hovering over the surface of the waters, and he spread out the universe and created the sun and the moon and the stars. And we say, well, when did that happen? How did it happen? But, we're starting to understand, what space is, that the space and time are a fabric that we exist in. And, I'm in this space and you're in that space and you're over there in the space-time fabric. And as we move through the space-time fabric, it affects it. It changes that a little bit. And how gravity works, that was one of the things that Einstein started to come up with in his general theory of relativity, not the special theory, but the general theory of relativity, how all of this, in gravitational fields, I should say. But anyway, how time changes as you move through space, and how that happens, and how that ties in with the creation itself, and how we look at distant stars and all that. There's a lot of stuff that's still unknown there, but it's tied up in the theory of relativity. And I'd like to say that I know it perfectly well and I understand it, but I still have lots of questions about how all that works together.
I like it.
So,
and when you get them all answered, we'll time travel together. Then is that what? No.
When we time travel, I mean, people think, well, you can travel back in time, and it appears that time only travels in one direction.
It's heading.
You go forwards, and so what you can do is you can either go forwards faster or slower relative to some other position. Yeah. And that's not, that's because people, it's more fun to think about being able to go back in time and stuff. But the idea, basically time appears to be, at least for us in this reference, it's always marching forward. Now it can march forward faster or slower depending on how fast you're moving through space. But or how deep of a gravity field you're in. Yeah. Slow, the deeper the gravity field you're in, the slower time goes. Those are facts that we can prove, but how all that plays into the bigger cosmology, I think, is interesting. Of course, we know that since God is outside of that, He's the creator of it. He could be at the end and at the beginning all at the same time. He could be the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, and be outside of time and already know the result, even if we don't, of a lot of things, of everything.
And you marinate on that for a little bit.
That's a fun. That's good that we know that we have a God that is greater. The ultimate cause has to be a greater agent than what exists. Yeah. And the greatest, obviously, if you have a universe which is as big as we can think of and as complicated as we can think of, the agent or cause of that must be greater still. Right. So God has to be greater than the universe.
Right. I kind of joke about the latest theory of the origin of the universe, because a superior mind, intellect, seeding a universe sounds a little bit like God. It sounds a little bit like
it sounds a lot like God, doesn't it? So I've heard another theory about gravity, though. It has to do with working on an automobile or anything else. If you're working at your house, the theory of gravity, everything says what goes up must go down. But the theory of gravity is if you drop an object that's the most important object, a screw that you only have one of that you must have, it will fall to the most inaccessible location possible.
I think Einstein was working on that way.
I think that's absolutely true. All you have to do is just, that one is self-evident.
Absolutely.
Obviously self-evident.
Absolutely. All right, I got one more question for you. We, as followers of Jesus, we believe in the authority of God's word. And how has the study of creation sciences bolstered your confidence in the word of God, and vice versa?
There are a lot of, as we start looking at different ideas, for instance, the idea that things were perfect and are now less perfect, they're going downhill. That is a layman's description of the second law of thermodynamics. Everything is going to a more random, more chaotic state.
Entropy.
It was more perfect. It's increasing its entropy, right? So it's going downhill, which is true, and it's included in the scriptures. It's a fairly looking back, here as in modern science, we can say, we understand that. But of course, that wasn't the way it was understood, at the time when the Bible was written or anything like that.
Sure.
But the Bible had it included very accurately, and that lots of other things that the Bible couldn't really, that people that were writing at the time of the Bible wouldn't have understood.
Or could have proven
the way that the heavens are stretched out like a fabric. That's a pretty insightful idea of the way the heavens are, the way space is. It is a fabric that is in, it's really 3 dimensions, but you can think of it in 2 dimensions as a stretched out fabric. And as mass is plopped into that fabric, it distorts it and creates gravity and all the other effects that the bending of light and all of that occurrence, is implied by Scripture. I mean, it's not, some of it is very. So I think Scripture for that shows us, there's an omniscient being revealing himself to mankind, and then allowing mankind from that to, learn from it. So I think that way, science confirms my view of the way, what Scriptures say, because the Scriptures themselves are very, very never inaccurate in their description of what happened.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Hebrews tells us that it's by faith that we believe God created. It's by faith we can even see these things. And I think even some of the fathers of science, modern science as we would know it, would say the same thing, that it was because of the faith that they had that they even pursued discoveries.
Most of the scientists that the names of were people who had a very deep faith, and they were looking at the world around them. Galileo, Newton are good examples, because and even Einstein. I mean, Einstein, had a different view of God, but he had this idea of the old one, or the Ancient of Days, and he would say, the most incomprehensible thing about the universe, this is a quote by Einstein, is that it's comprehensible, that it's logical, that it makes sense. Because if it's randomness, it shouldn't make sense. Yeah. Right? There shouldn't be all these laws, but there are all these laws that make up the universe. Yeah. And that's, of course, Kepler and Einstein and Galileo and Newton were looking for those laws. They knew they had to be there because there was a God and intelligence behind it, and they wanted to discover those thoughts. And Einstein said, I want to know God's thoughts. All the rest are just the details. Wow. So trying to focus in on, the fabric of the world that we see around us, as Romans said, that world is open to us like a book, right? And it is this general revelation of God. If we look at the world around us, should indicate there's an intelligent being, a creator God.
Amen. Well, I hope that's been encouraging to you, and I would encourage you.
I didn't get any of these questions in advance, did I?
I didn't send them to you.
You did?
Yeah, but you didn't read them.
I didn't read them. I didn't see them.
In his defense, I sent them very late last night.
Oh, okay. So
it's very late.
I didn't see them.
And those answers were fantastic.
I was thinking, man, is he going to send me those questions? I
know.
I wanted to know them in advance before the debate.
I got them.
I was reading.
Copied.
So what was it on? What was it on? Was it
just email?
Okay. Yeah. My mistake.
Well, you answered them like you got them ahead.
Yeah. I hadn't seen them. I was telling Sarah, I said, I don't think Daniel sent me this.
Well, when Ed does his master class on science or creation, I know some of you in the Master Servants have had a little taste of that. Be sure to go. But we're grateful that you're here. Thank you for taking time out of your day. And I hope that this kind of just got the thoughts going and maybe got you excited about at least the confidence that we can have as followers of Jesus. We don't have to be embarrassed to engage in conversation with people who may not think it's reasonable to believe in a creator, because the more you get into it, the more reasonable it becomes. Brian has our blessing of the week. Brian, take us home.
Yeah, we're over time, so I'll keep it fast. But Sunday we introduced a newer song. It's a Laura Story song that probably was new to a lot of you if you were here. And I just wanted to remind you that Jesus, he carries our burdens, and that was what that song was about. That you can rest in him, and it was just filled with these promises, and I just wanted to read some of them as we close out. Jesus is enough. He's our mercy seat. He's mighty to heal. He's our hope, our peace, our comforter. All those things are in the verses of that song. He's the bread of life. He offers grace overflowing. He's our guide. He offers life everlasting. And so this week, I just hope that you trust in those promises and really believe that Jesus is enough for whatever your circumstances are.
Folks, this is the first time that Brian's blessing has not been a challenge. So I just hope you understand how special this is. Usually it's a challenge, not just a blessing. Today it's just a blessing. Oh,
yep.
Good. Well, God bless you all. Thank you for being with us. We can't wait to see you here next week on the Ripple Effect Podcast.